What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast, which you can find, as always, right here on the Crossover channel. I'm your host, Kanaye Tesoro, and today I just want to kind of touch on a little bit something that's really caught in the attention of UConn fans, that being the outstanding play of both Jacob Furphy and Eric Reibe in the U19 World Cup that is currently being played right now in Switzerland, I believe, is where the games are taking place. Both those guys have just really been hooping since the tournament has started, and definitely have turned some heads, specifically Furphy. That's a guy who I and a lot of other people thought that maybe he'd be buried on the bench, just considering how loaded the UConn backcourt and wing spots are. He might end up seeing some higher volume minutes this year. Definitely excited for what he's shown out of this U19 World Cup play. Same thing goes for Eric Reibe. He's a guy who I definitely think is probably going to be coming off the bench for Terrace Reed whenever he needs a breather at the center spot. But his skill set is really undeniable. The amount of different tools he brings to the table. So I'm basically just going to be touching on that in this episode today and a few other notes, which I'll probably start off with. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, it really does help if you guys can engage with our content any way you can, whether it's liking our videos, subscribing to our channel, or just telling other people about it. It really does all go help and influence YouTube's algorithm. Will get more people to watch our videos and grow what we do here at the Crossover. So just to touch on a few quick notes first, I do think it is important to mention that Malachi Smith, I believe, has undergone a procedure in his ankle or toe. I can't fully remember off the top of my head which one of the two it is. I believe it was a lingering injury he kind of had at Dayton. I know he's had kind of a riddled injury history there. But I think since he's gotten to STORRS and been practicing, he might have re-aggravated something. He did have a minor procedure done. I believe he is targeting mid-August to be able to return to full contact basketball play. But that's definitely something I think that is important to know, just considering he's going to be playing an important role being the lead guard off the bench this year, I believe. And it's definitely something you don't want to hear. Injuries in general, it's never good news to hear. Outside of that, there hasn't been too much UConn practice film that has been put out by UConn men's basketball on their Instagram, Twitter, and just in general. But I have heard really, really good things coming out of the camps of people who have sat into practices. They think one thing that I think is important to mention is Braylon Mullins. One person said that he thinks Braylon Mullins is going to be the Con Knipple of this year. If that's true, then that's really, really good news for this UConn program. Being the guy, I forget off the top of my head who it is, so I apologize, but he was saying that he thinks he's the guy in this year's draft class who could end up being a legit first round lottery pick after kind of not really having too much noise surrounding him going into the year. I know his recruiting process was definitely something that was really, really talked about, just with him being between Indiana, UConn, and a few other blue blood schools. Ultimately, of course, he chose UConn. Happy he's here. I'm really excited to see him play this season. But again, I think he could bring a lot to the table with the size he brings on the wing. I do think he needs to get a little bit bigger, but I'm sure UConn's coaching staff does have him in the weight room. Just, I want him to be ready for the physicality that is going to come with Big East regular season conference play. But on top of that, just it seems like he's going to be someone who can bring knockdown shooting, whether he's in a starting role or coming off the bench, where I personally have him at. And I'm going to touch on how that might end up working later on in this episode. And just one more thing that I did notice of the one clip that I did think was worth talking about the most. I believe it was in the thing UConn's men's basketball's Instagram account put out, where Solo Ball was mic'd up for a practice, and the likes of Steph Castle and Jordan Hawkins were also in the practice. So really cool seeing those two guys come back to STORRS to get a little practice in with some of the guys on the roster going to this next year. But Solo Ball, specifically what I want to talk about is what seems to be a lot of a defensive improvement we're going to see out of Solo going to this next year. That's something that he really wanted to target in how he attacked this offseason. He said that on multiple podcasts that I've seen, where he's come on and talked about how he wants to be more than just a three-point shooter this year, wants to be able to do more off the dribble, be a little bit better of a playmaker, and just improve defensively. I think that was his number one thing. And there was a clip in that mic'd up segment where of their practice where they were playing a 1v1 drill, and Solo Ball got some really, really good stops on the likes of, I believe it was Silas Demery Jr. I forget who else was the second one, but Hassan Diar was also in that practicing with the guys. So that was really cool to see Haas come back and do that. But definitely he got a really nice block on, I believe it was one of Haas or Silas. But again, of course, they're only going to show the highlights. They're not going to show any of the mishaps that happen in practice. But going off of that, I definitely think Solo's instincts look really, really good as opposed to what we kind of saw out of him this past year. But I'm really excited because I think Solo has all the tools to be a really, really good defender. Now let's get into the main topic of this video. That being, like I mentioned at the start, the really outstanding play we've seen out of Jacob Furphy and Eric Reibe in this World Cup U19 that's taking place in Switzerland. Jacob Furphy has been really, honestly, you could argue one of the top 3, 4, 5 players that have honestly kind of just played the best and are coming out of this World Cup tournament as winners, I would say. I think Jacob Furphy is someone who a lot of fans across the sport, including UConn fans and myself, didn't really know all too much about. Of course, me and Josh have talked about so much how it's really hard to get a good gauge on what international prospects are going to be as they're coming over to the U.S. to play college basketball, just because there's really no true ranking metric that any program or website really has out on ranking international guys who are coming over to play college basketball. And again, he is coming over from Australia. He didn't play high school in the United States the way Eric Reibe did. So there was a lot of unknowns and kind of question marks surrounding Jacob Furphy. And I definitely think before this World Cup that he was someone that might be buried on the bench, just considering how loaded UConn's backcourt and wing spots are. Jacob Furphy is, I believe, around 6'6". He has a really large frame, but from the tape that I've seen in this World Cup tournament, he has a really good ball handle for someone of his size. He's good at getting downhill, really good guy at controlling the pace he plays at. In this tournament, he's averaging 21.3 points per game, almost 4 rebounds, 3 assists. I definitely think that the skill set that he possesses, the tools that he has, is something that might honestly give him a chance at cracking the starting lineup. I personally think Jalen Stewart will start at the 3 going into the year. I've been vocal about that in the past. I've talked about it. Me and Josh had a segment about it in the last episode you saw on the Saturdays and Stores podcast. It was also uploaded to both the Crossover U and Stay the Program podcast as well. So definitely check that video out if you haven't. We had a whole segment talking about whether Jalen Stewart or Braylon Mullins was going to start. I came out and said, I'm a firm believer Jalen Stewart is the starter on opening night at the 3. Of course, there's still a whole realm of possibility that either Braylon Mullins or maybe even Jacob Furphy gets into the mix. But I will say that I do think the thing that could give Jacob Furphy the edge in potentially cracking that starting lineup is just the playmaking skill set he brings to the table. Where UConn, in the 2 years that they won the national championships, going back 2 years ago and 3 years back in 2023, they always had 1 to 3 guys who could handle the ball and play make. Bigger guys that had playmaking skill sets. I mean, going back to 23, you had both the likes of Tristan Newton and Andre Jackson Jr. Both guys could handle the ball, could pass, and were really smart decision-making wise. Same thing kind of went the next year with, of course, you bring back Tristan Newton for his grad year, and then you bring Cam Spencer. Cam Spencer was honestly kind of advertised as more so of a knockdown shooter, but he proved that he could do a lot in the playmaking aspect of the game as well. Now, going into this year, I do think Jalen Stewart starts. I would still lean that way. But Jalen Stewart isn't at least what we've seen out of him so far, isn't really the best playmaker. He's more out there to kind of be like a pure scorer, 3-level threat type of guy where he can attack you at any level of the court, offensively in the half court. Braylon Mullins, I think, is more so kind of like in that same sort of Jordan Hawkins solo ball type of role where he's a guy that's your movement shooter. You can run him off of pin downs and screens. He's going to knock down threes. He doesn't bring too much to the table playmaking wise, but of course, we won't know that for sure until we see him actually play. But from what I've seen out of Jacob Furphy in this World Cup, the U19 World Cup, he definitely possesses a really unique skill set. And like I said, being able to handle the ball, make good passes, make the right reads. And I mean, he's hit a lot of step back threes. He could do a little bit off the dribble. He had a really, really outstanding game against Team USA where he posted 24 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. Really efficient shooting we've seen out of him in this World Cup tournament. I think he's someone that really kind of similar to Kasparis Yakuchonis, who we saw this past year at Illinois, and you just get picked by the Miami Heat at pick 20. But I definitely think coming over, those were some of the numbers Kasparis had in his overseas play, and you could definitely see the parallels between those two games. I've even heard someone kind of throw out a wild comparison to Jacob Furphy of Luka Doncic. Of course, that's a really, really high bar for you to set for an international freshman coming in. I don't think he's going to be as good as Luka Doncic, if I'm being completely honest, but I'm not ruling out that possibility. But I definitely think, again, he brings a really unique skill set to the table and is definitely someone who could give both Jalen Stewart and Braylon Mullins a run for their money and cracking that starting lineup for sure. Now, to get into Eric Reibe just really quickly, again, really solid stats in this U19 tournament. He's averaging 15.6 points per game, 5.4 rebounds, and just under 2 assists. Now, I will say, from what I've seen, I don't personally go ahead and watch the full length of these games, but I do see some of the highlights every now and then on Instagram and on YouTube, just whenever I can catch it. But from what I've heard from scouts and what I've seen from the tape, I do think he is a little soft, as is by no means the right word to say. I do think he needs to be a little bit more aggressive in the post and going to the basket. But I think a lot of that is attributed to him kind of still growing into this 7-foot frame. He is a legit 7-footer, something which his UConn program lacked a lot of this past year, just considering you lose Donovan Clingan, who you had the last 2 years, first of his freshman year coming off the bench for Adama Sanogo, his second year being the starting center and being arguably the best big man defender in the country with what he brought rim protection wise. I don't think Eric Reibe is where Donovan Clingan was coming in as a rim protector, but I definitely think he can get to that point. I'm playing for Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley is going to push him really, really hard, just considering he's going to be the backup 5 and someone who you're going to need to play high volume minutes, probably close to 20 minutes a night at times when Terrace is perhaps in foul trouble, which we hope is not the case again this season, or just needs a breather and is on the bench. But offensively, I don't think there's any denying the unique skill set he brings to the table. Just he can space the floor, hit the 3-point shot. He's had some really solid scoring games. He scored against Australia, who he actually played this morning. Furphy and Reibe went toe-to-toe. I believe Furphy scored 13 or 14 and Reibe posted 12. In the last game that Reibe played, he had 25. The game before that, 20. The game before that, 15. And I will say I would like to see him be a little bit more aggressive on the glass, but again, what he can do in UConn's offense and what I would assume are some pick and pop actions that Dan Hurley is going and Luke Murray will draw up for him. On top of that, he's pretty solid at passing out of the post too, so he brings a little bit of playmaking aspect there to the table there. But really just altogether, I'm really excited to see both these guys play. And I definitely think that there's definitely a chance that, Eric Reibe could definitely, not Eric Reibe, Jacob Furphy definitely has a chance to crack that starting lineup now. I definitely think. Does it end up happening? I don't think so, just because I think Dan Hurley's going to turn to the experience of Jalen Stewart over both Mullins and Furphy. Eric Reibe, though, definitely could end up getting some starts if, again, hope it doesn't happen if Terrace ever dealing with any type of injury, or just, again, maybe he is a little banged up, needs a little bit of a breather, a game where he's coming off the bench more so. But again, I think I'm going to really, really like to see the 1-2 punch between Terrace and Eric. Just different types of skill sets. Terrace more of a low post presence. Eric Reibe can stretch the floor a little bit, hit the 3, and then play make out of the post as well. If he can be even half of what Donovan Clingan was defensively, then I think that's going to do so much for this program. But Furphy, I think, is by far probably the biggest winner UConn-wise in this tournament. Just the performances he's showcased, where he's had big scoring nights, playmaked, and did pretty much everything that you'd hope to get out of an international prospect. That's someone who Illinois went heavy after in his recruiting process, just considering Illinois loves to go after those international guys. Thankfully, we were able to land them at UConn. These are two guys who I think could end up playing 2 or 3 years at the school. And I think, year 1, they might be contributors off the bench. Then year 2, year 3, they could be starters and be really, really good college players. But pretty much, I think that's going to take care of my thoughts on both Furphy and Reibe in this episode today. Again, I'm really, really excited to see both these guys in STORRS this year in whatever role they end up playing. Quick note, I do want to congratulate Liam McNeely on getting drafted by the Charlotte Hornets. Really, just, great player at UConn for the short time he was here, his freshman season. But I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in the NBA. Hopefully he can follow in the footsteps of Steph Castle and go make a run at that Rookie of the Year trophy. Again, I think that's going to take care of everything I have for this episode today. I want to wish you all happy 4th. I know it's going to be going up on Saturday, but I am recording it on July 4th. So happy 4th to everybody who's watching. Until next episode, I'll see you all next time.